You're watching the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with your host, me, Michael Philpott, today. And I'm really excited about this show today. We're going to go down the rabbit hole. I'll always say going down, down the rabbit hole, but I think we're going to ascend to super consciousness instead of going down a rabbit hole. We're going to ascend to super consciousness. So before we get started, Joseph, I just have to say just a little shout out to all my listeners who have been listening and sending their support and their loves and those beautiful DMs. Thank you so much. I really appreciate every one of you and helping grow this station, or this show, I should say, station. Maybe I'll have a station. But yeah, I really appreciate that. So Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show today. And congratulations on book number 3.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, be able to share what I know with folks.
Yeah, and this is right up my listeners' alley too, as well. I had another show similar. We talked about consciousness, and it really got a lot of views, got a lot of people feedback on it. So I'm really happy that you're on this. So like all my guests, I always have to know the backstory, because I find it so fascinating. When we're all on this journey, we're all on this spiritual journey, we're all learning as souls, incarnating on this beautiful planet that we have here. Just figure out how it started for you. Where did this curiosity, this love or understanding about consciousness really start for you?
Well, my college years are sort of emblematic of the rest of my life. So I began college at the University of Colorado in Boulder, thoroughly expecting to get a degree in science. And I come from a family with lots of engineers and scientists. So it was, part of my background, my growing up. And I was well on my way into the field of molecular biology, which was really fascinating. It was in the days when they were still figuring out how DNA worked and how it provided templates for creating proteins that built the body. And I was fascinated. But I was also a child of the 60s, and by this time the early 70s, and I was experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs. And I had already had lots of experiences, and they were what most people think of as recreational. It was just fun. It kept you up all night, gave you lots of energy, made things look really weird. But this particular experience I had was far deeper, and I felt deeply, calmly present. And I felt the presence of a greater reality. I felt the presence of God, not as some, where the clouds open and the angels descend and God appears in golden light, but just I knew, without knowing how I knew, that I was experiencing the sacredness of the divine presence. And in that, I felt the best I had ever felt in my entire life. I felt loving, I felt kind, I felt calm. And everybody who I came in contact with was obviously experiencing that from me as well. So It was, it wasn't like sensational headline writing, but it was life-changing.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had discovered something that was the deeper me, the me I always wanted to be and feel and become and express. So this very much increased my interest in pursuing a spiritual life. And it flipped my major in college from molecular biology to, at that time, Greek philosophy, Greek studies, in a sense, Western philosophy. And I later transferred to UC Berkeley, where I studied more of Indian philosophy. And along this process, I began meditating. I began being drawn to the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the author of the Autobiography of a Yogi, who, has millions of people have read that book and been changed by it. And it changed my life, set me on a path that I'm still on today. And I'm living in a spiritual community called Ananda. But all my life, really, I had these two sides, which I loved science. I loved the precision, the exactitude of the scientific approach. And I loved the inner experience that science can only suggest, but not give you. So those are both sides of me, and I've continued to be sort of a hybrid of those two to this day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I love. I think it's really important nowadays too, as well, to have a person like yourself bridge that gap between the spiritual and the scientific world, because so many people, they're all in spiritually, or they're all in kind of this scientific materialistic kind of reductionist type idea where they're just living these kind of separate dualities almost. And it's nice for people who want to explore spirituality, but they just can't wrap their head around. Sometimes they get that whole woo-woo thing. It's like, oh, this is too woo-woo for me. I can't grasp this. This is not me. Like yoga, meditation.
I can't go there.
Yeah, I can't go there. Yeah, they get this kind of block already up. But if you put them in a scientific way and you kind of explain to them, okay, this is what's kind of going on, then there's that little light bulb that kind of goes, oh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, okay, I could see that. And it really changes their perspective. So I really appreciate you kind of spending your lifetime, really kind of bridging those two gaps, especially with this, your second book, The Physics of God, understanding that and bringing that to light. And then now with the new book, fascinating topic. So would you consider yourself a scientist at this point?
Probably scientists who have, a string of initials after their name would not consider me a scientist, because I never actually got a degree in science or had a career in science in the normal sense of the word. But I think it's important for people to understand that even the scientists who do have a string of initials after their name only understand, typically in depth, one area of specialization of science. And in everything else that they might also understand and know about, they are lay scientists. So what I like to say is I'm a lay scientist everywhere. I have no specific scientific depth of knowledge in one field, but I do have a broad and deep understanding of how all the different aspects of science connect to each other in a way that in some cases, many cases, scientists themselves don't have.
Yeah, I mean, your understanding of it it's very, I hate to simplify, but it seems very simplistic. When you read it, it doesn't go like way over your head, which is really fantastic, because sometimes, if you get too clinical, too scientific, you kind of lose people. And it's always a nice balance of an approach. When you have that broader aspect, you can combine the different things to make it seem more digestible, I guess. So you're not reading, it's not like going to college and reading a science textbook when you're going, oh, I just want to fall asleep. It's really, really brilliant how you do that. Yeah. Now, one of the things you talk about, is understanding about consciousness is through physics, which I always find just fascinating. And I mean, I'm an idiot when it comes to physics. I'd be honest with you. I mean, I know a little bit, and it's only because of people like yourself that I know anything really about quantum physics and all that stuff. But maybe just for people who are listening, can you touch on that a bit, maybe help them understand why physics is part of this understanding of consciousness?
Well, in the deepest theories of physics, the early pioneers of the emerging relativity theory, quantum physics, later string theory, which is kind of an extension of quantum physics. The early pioneers in those fields were really wondering, what was beyond, what could possibly support these discoveries they were making, which generally are referred to as quantum weirdness, right? And one of the key discoveries they made is what's known as the observer effect.
Okay.
And the observer effect is difficult to explain quickly, but essentially what experimentation by quantum physicists revealed was that matter has this duality, that it can behave like a wave and it can behave like a particle. So it can behave as if it's energy, which underneath the surface, matter is energy, but it can actually behave like energy altogether, or it can behave like a particle. It can behave like what we in our everyday lives experience. But the fascinating thing that they discovered is that matter only behaves like a particle, like the matter that we are familiar with, in the presence of an observer, an intelligent observer.
Wow.
So this confounds the mind. I tell my friends this and they say, do you mean when I'm not in my room disappears and turns into just a bunch of energy? And the answer is yes. And so, of course, they try to run into the room quickly and catch it before it turns into matter and things like that. Because it seems so counterintuitive that,
yeah, of course.
the physical world that we know so well, we touch and we feel and we smell and we see, can go in and out of these two different realities, depending on whether there's somebody there to be observing it. But this seems to fundamentally be true. It's never been disproven that an observer is necessary. So, as I say, the early founders of quantum physics wanted to know how is that possible? How could a mind, how could an intelligent person, how could somebody just viewing these things turn it into matter? And they inescapably concluded that there had to be consciousness, that consciousness had to be a reality distinct from the physical brain and distinct from the energy that makes up matter.
Wow.
And people like Heisenberg started studying Vedanta and looking into Eastern teachings that are much more explicit about how consciousness underlies matter. So this comes to us from physicists. This comes to us from the great minds that studied these fundamental principles, and they concluded that underneath everything is consciousness. And this connects deeply and completely to Eastern spirituality. And that really is the bridge. That is why there is no conflict between science and spirituality, is because they're both experiencing or positing consciousness.
Yeah, wow. So how would you define consciousness? I mean, there's a lot of takes on what people describe as consciousness. How would you best describe consciousness from your
It
perspective?
has a lot of facets. I would say consciousness is where we get our awareness from. So whatever else we might be able to theorize about reality, the fact is I'm aware of you, you're aware of me, and that it's not a hallucination I'm having that is only inside my brain, because we can exchange information that we both then keep. So consciousness is not an illusion. Consciousness is this real quality, this real foundation to human experience that allows us to be aware. It also allows us to think. It allows us to feel. So an extension of consciousness, a manifestation of consciousness is emotion. So in Eastern teachings, it's often described as an overarching intelligence as well, and that we are a part of that overarching intelligence, which the easiest term to use for is God. It can be spirit, it can be the absolute, it has so many names, but we are it and it is us.
So how would then super consciousness fit into that? Is that the connection to the divine? Is just a larger awareness of something greater than what we are during our conscious abilities? Like we're just seeing here right now, I'm conscious of you. But as I move up into a higher state of consciousness or up to the super conscious, am I in direct connection with the divine? Is that how it's perceived?
Yes, no, you're saying it clearly and excellently. The only thing that I would add is that it's not that we aren't, in a sense, super conscious right now. It's just that we are choosing to only be aware of a small part of what superconscious makes us potentially aware of. So we're choosing to be aware only through the senses and only through what we can perceive through the senses in what we think of as the physical world around us. And so that's conscious awareness. But conscious awareness is just a subset of superconsciousness. All of us have superconscious moments. That is to say, we have an awareness that goes beyond just that ordinary day-to-day conscious awareness without really realizing it. So when we have an intuition,
Okay.
as many people have, where you think about somebody and the phone rings and it's that person, right? It happens too often for it to be a coincidence. So how did we either know intuitively that that person was going to call us, or how did that person decide to call us because we were thinking about them? None of these things are explainable just through the world of matter that science has explored so deeply.
That would basically
We know it through this larger consciousness that we all share.
Yeah. Would that be similar to interconnectedness and the kind of non-locality effect of?
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're all interconnected. There's this interconnection of everything. So, and that is the super conscious, is just the collective consciousness of everybody. Would that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes. The reason why I like the term superconscious and used it in the book, Breaking Through the Limits of the Brain, is because it implies that it is just like the next stage of the consciousness we already have.
Yeah.
And that being superconscious doesn't necessarily come all in one, completely changing moment of how we perceive reality. We expand gradually and become more and more and more superconscious. And as we do that, we do experience more meaningfully, it's more real that we have this connection to others, that we have a heart-to-heart bond with everyone that we know, and that the conscious awareness that makes us only aware of the senses really is like a filter that cuts off what we're aware of to just that. But in fact, we are and always will be and always can be more superconscious.
So what do you think that's been limiting us? Do you think it's more of like an overall like cultural, religion, societal upbringing? What do you think it's just we've been programmed to and from cut off from this super consciousness and we're not aware of it? What is your understanding of that?
I think to some degree, it is a societal thing that we do get acculturated from infancy to use our apparatus, to use our brain, to be aware of and operate within what the senses can show us. But there are many stories of very young children describing to their parents an awareness of what they often themselves describe as angels or beings of light, or just other beings that their parents can't perceive.
Yeah, I've heard many stories like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, when children are really young, they haven't created all the circuits, their neural circuits in their brain that they will have by the time they're adults. And so they're still naturally superconscious. The circuits we tend to create in order to function in this world, from walking to talking to speaking, to understanding speech, these are all really necessary for us to function. And then we gradually create more and more of those circuits for interacting with other people, connecting to thoughts, connecting to emotions. But all those circuits are built within the context of how we can interact with people on a conscious level. And we gradually leave behind any openings, if you will. We kind of fill in every potential circuit with conscious awareness. But that doesn't absolutely block us from rewiring the brain for that innate superconsciousness we had when we were children. It just makes it a little more difficult. We have to choose to do that. And as I say in my book, one of the most significant tools, powerful tools we have for rewiring the brain is meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a firm believer. I love meditation. I just think it's one of the quintessential things that we really need to, as a society, but also as an individual, because I always think we start with personal individualizations of our own reality and change that, and then you can start working on a larger scale. But yeah, I solely believe in that. So part of the process of meditation, are we kind of doing some neural pruning? Is that what we're doing? We're kind of shutting off the craziness of life and what we've learned, and we're just kind of shutting that down so we can perceive that. So we're pruning some of the stuff we don't need, and we're allowing stuff to kind of, I guess I'm trying to get the best way to describe it, is like, from my understanding, is that because the brain is so neuroplastic, we can change things in the brain, from my understanding, is
Yes.
that when we go into meditation, we're silencing a lot of that. So those circuitries are not firing as much. So I guess that whole idea is what we don't fire, we rewire, or something like that. I think that what the expression was. But slowly it starts to kind of open up those pathways that we can actually reconnect again. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. I think that a way to understand it is that the neural circuits that we ourselves created in order for us to function in the world become so interconnected one with the other that lead us to, sensory input will make us have certain reactions, and those reactions will stimulate thoughts or emotions, or trains of thoughts or memories. And we have literally created millions of these circuits, and they tend to not only fire as a circuit, but they tend to fire other circuits. And that we have this continuous, what I call the fireworks show of the mind, that goes on from when we wake up until we go back to sleep. That just one thing leads to another. And to use the analogy perhaps more richly, the continuing sound of a fireworks show of things exploding is analogous to our senses sending us input. And then the big starbursts of light are analogous to our emotions, to our thoughts, to our memories. And like a fireworks show, we tend to be entranced. We like our fireworks show for the most part. Although,
So true.
although for for some of us, and in fact, many of us, there are parts of that show that create stress, that create conflict with other people, that keep us in emotions that we really would rather not have, or initiate unwanted behaviors. They're all part of the same show. Not every circuit in your brain gets fired in any given day, but they're all there and they could fire in any given day. So in many ways, we go on automatic because of all these circuits that we've created.
Yeah, like that automatic pilot. You just get out of bed, you're like a zombie and just continuous. Just like this, you're like Groundhog Day, just kind of repeating itself over and over and over again. And it's sometimes you don't realize it. I've done this many a times where I would have a beautiful meditation and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And then all of a sudden, something like will just snap, and then I'm back into my old self and I've got all these crazy thoughts and I'm going, whoa, where did this go from? But I'm realizing now that the more I meditate, those crazy thoughts and that cycle of thinking and feeling is not, instead of like hours or even days, or even weeks of that, it's more like it's briefer moments, I would say. It's almost, I would say it's hours. I mean, sometimes I go off on a tangent and then it's like, you get all frustrated and you just, that cycle. And then it's like, you realize, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'm being an idiot here. I'm being a dick. I gotta straighten this out. And then you have that more gentle awareness. That's what I really found about my meditation, is I really get to understand who I am and what I am about when I'm meditating, because I realize how I'm that frustrated person that's sitting there always on the inside, just waiting to come out. And it's looking for an excuse to come out and show itself. And yeah, I just find it so fascinating. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, there's always this topic of the brain versus the mind. And is the mind in the brain, or is the brain separate from the mind? And how do we change the mind? Do we have to change the brain in order to change the mind? Or do we do the change the mind, or we change the brain? How does that work?
Well, I think there's accumulating evidence that emotions, memories, thoughts, and, if you will, mind, since we tend to experience thoughts and emotions and memories within the context of what we think of as our mind, there's accumulating evidence that all of those originate non-locally.
Okay, explain that, please.
So non-locality is a core principle of both quantum physics and string theory, which is an extension of quantum physics. And essentially, non-locality is a ever-present, interpenetrating reality that we are all in all the time, but it's essentially a higher frequency energy realm that isn't separate from us, but it's not visible to us through the senses. And non-locality has its own rules. So entanglement, which is an area of fascination for many people once they bump into it, the notion that you can have a photon essentially cut in half, turned into two photons, and those photons sent in completely opposite directions from each other. Theoretically, they can be as far apart as across the entire universe from each other, and they still have instantaneous exchange of information.
Wow.
Which breaks the notion that light has an upper limit of speed. If information can travel faster than light, what does that do for the laws of relativity and the way that they think the universe works? So it doesn't break the speed of light because that exchange of information takes place non-locally. It takes place in this pure energy realm that surrounds us and supports us, but it's a pure energy realm that has no distance. This is, like, confutes the mind again. There is no space. Even though you can think of it as a vast realm, it has no space. And so there's no distance between those two halves of that photon in non-locality. So when they exchange information, they're not breaking the laws of the speed of light. They are just obeying the laws of non-locality. So this is how we can have this connection, instantaneous connection to our thoughts and feelings and memories and mind that behave differently than the physical body and what our senses tell us. But we're both. As I like to put it, we always have one foot on earth and one foot in heaven, as I call it, which is, there's more to that description than I've given, of this non-local realm, which in many ways is more of who we are than the physical body, because our emotions, certainly our feeling, is so central to who we think we are and what we experience every day. And the thoughts we have, the memories we can recall, all of these things that exist, unambiguously for us. It's not, I couldn't talk you out of the thought that you had a thought, that you had an emotion, that you experienced these things. Yet, there is no evidence that the brain, physical brain, can create them.
Interesting. Yeah, because that's what I always was, curious, because people always sometimes ask me, so Mike, when I'm changing my thoughts, am I changing my brain? And sometimes, again, I'm not a scientist. Sometimes I just say, well, if you're changing your thoughts, there's a good possibility that you're changing your brain because, there's a change in chemistry. There's a change of something happening physically that's within that. Have you done part of the research to see how the physical body changes when you start changing the brain in the thought process?
Well, the simplest way to describe it really is that the brain will create neural circuits to support anything you do, anything you think, anything you feel, anything you remember, to make it easier for you to do those things, recall those thoughts, have those emotions, or recall those memories. So your mind is your brain is an obliging servant.
Okay.
Whatever you do, it builds circuits to support.
So it could be either positive or negative, depending on how you want to use it.
Right. Or it can be subtle or not subtle. So the brain will create circuits that support the kind of experiences you have in meditation, which are non-local, which are more, a result of putting aside the fireworks show and experiencing what you're like when your brain isn't automatically going through all these interconnected circuits that keep you interested in the physical world. You put those aside, which is not easy, as we all know, because part of that is learning to sit still and learning to concentrate. But when we sit still successfully and when we are focused, the fireworks show naturally subsides because we're not triggering it. We're not, setting off this pinball machine, this frantic pinball machine of reactions any longer. But what we experience isn't nothing. What we experience is wonderful, right? Everybody who meditates for any length of time will, like you did and everybody else I know, say, I love to meditate. I love what I experience in meditation. It makes me a better person. It makes me happier, makes me healthier. Take your pick. The reason it does is because you're experiencing your deeper, non-local reality, your deeper self.
But would you call that your soul self? Like you're really connecting to your soul, like the essence, the divine essence of who you really are in some ways? That'd be a correct analogy.
I wouldn't put it necessarily that you're connecting to it, because it makes it sound as if your soul is off inhabiting some other realm while you're here, right?
Yeah, I guess it really does make sense. Yeah. So I
but
guess
I would say that the feeling that you're connecting is because you're becoming more aware of your deeper self.
Okay, I like that one. Yeah, I think that's a better way.
What you truly are.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's a little bit better analogy. Is that because again, it gets that whole idea of separateness that we've always suffered from. I think that's a lot of today's problems with humanity, is that this sense of separateness from everything and everything and everybody, and that causes a lot of problem. But yeah, I really love that analogy. Yeah, I'll just have to make sure I reframe that from that. But yeah, I just find it so amazing when we can have, and I'm so thankful for books like yours, because I think this is really the precipice of change that we really need as a society, as humans, to further just move on without trying to destroy each other, is to have that awareness and to have that little bit of knowledge to make us understand that, there's so much more to us than these, our physical bodies. I like to call it our meat suits that we wear every day. And we can do that some more. So one of the things in your book, I'll just revisit, is about meditation. Are there certain meditations are better than others, or is it just start meditating? Is there more of a fundamental way of meditating that may be more, I wouldn't say fast tracking, because I always hate that word fast tracking, but you know how people are, is it, I want it now. I want that instantaneous. Can I get it now? Is there something that can help, ease the transition, because sometimes it's hard to sit still. You got your body, so your body wants to ravage and get going. Do you have techniques within the book that teach us that?
Well, I do present what's called the hungsaw technique of meditation. Okay. And it's, as you might guess from the words hung and saw, comes to us from India. But then before going into that and why I recommend it, I would say more generally to your question that if you have a meditation technique that you use now and you are really successful with it and it is wonderful, then just keep doing it. There are tools. Simple tools can create wonderful things. Complex tools can create wonderful things. And if you're already creating wonderful things, stick with the tool that you have. But if you're like me, it's always a challenge to concentrate. It's always a challenge to focus my mind and not just get carried away by trains of thought. As a writer, I'm constantly writing. I remember a friend of mine said that I knew him as a photographer, and he always used to carry this camera around. And then I noticed that he wasn't anymore. And he said, yeah, I finally had to stop doing it deliberately, because everywhere I went, I saw camera frames around everything. I was always thinking about the reality I was in terms of what part of it I could take a picture of. So as a writer, the downside to being a writer is that I'm always kind of making arguments in my head. If somebody were to say this, what would my response be? And it's very easy to carry that into meditation for me.
Of course. And then just add anything else during the regular day. Oh, I got to go grocery shopping. I got to clean the house. I got to take the kids to school or whatever. I mean, you got all those zillion thoughts going on in your head. Then you have your own particular thoughts, about writing. So, wow.
So getting that focus is wonderful. It's really when your mind quiets a bit and it doesn't have this storm of thoughts that you really have the deepest, most wonderful experiences. So mindfulness meditation, which is well known, suggests that you just watch your thoughts. You let them come in, you let them go. And I think that it can be effective for many people. Hungsaw technique basically says, well, your mind wants to think about things. Your mind's predilection is to concentrate on things and be aware of them. So the hungsaw technique says, think about your breath and think about this hung, and saw. So as you inhale, you say mentally hung. And as you exhale, you say mentally saw. You let the length of those words in your mind sort of stretch out to match the length of your inhalation and exhalation. And eventually you put your focus at the point between the eyebrows, which is where we tend to think anyway. And if you do that, you may find that your thoughts subside more readily than just trying to watch your thoughts and hope they subside on their own. Stillness is a key, I think, to every kind of meditation. Vipassana meditation, walking meditation may be an exception, but in general, the more we fidget, the more our mind gets stirred up.
Do you recommend lying down or sitting up?
Well, the lying down will allow your body to relax really deeply, but we're so trained to fall asleep when we lie down that it's difficult personally for me to meditate when I'm lying down, because I wake up an hour later and realize I just had a very nice nap, but I didn't meditate. So I've had that happen. Yeah. There's nothing inherent about lying down being bad for meditating. It's just you tend to go subconscious rather than superconscious. So sitting up is, what makes us generally associates our mind with being aware and focused. So I recommend various ways to sit. You can sit in a chair. I've been sitting in a chair for 50 years, and I can unhesitatingly recommend it, because I could never fully get comfortable in cross-legged positions. Yeah, I'm the same way. I just didn't have the hip dexterity to sit in that position. So just a regular straight back chair works wonders for me. I'm the same way. But I do admire those people that can do that for long periods of time. I go, dang, that's some serious flexibility and concentration, because all I could just think about is like, how am I going to get up afterwards? Right. And even if that's the ultimate issue, the problem for me is that I'm just aware that my hips hurt, or my leg is uncomfortable, or whatever it is when I'm trying to sit cross-legged. So I can do cross-legged for parts of my meditation, and then I move and I sit in a chair. So it kind of extends my meditation time that I can do for me. But essentially, however you can sit, have your spine straight and be relaxed, do that. And then use something like hungsaw, which I highly recommend, to keep the mind focused on something, so that your thoughts as well as your physical movements will also subside. You put the two together, physical stillness and mental stillness, and you can have wonderfully deep experiences. Yeah, one of the things I'm noticing in my meditation is gaps in time. I'm finding that I will do this guided meditation, and I'm noticing, like, let's start off one thing. And as we're working through the centers of the body, I'm still thinking I'm on the first center, and next thing you know, the meditation is almost done. And I'm going like, what happened there? There was like this big gap in between. And I just feel like, and I'm not asleep, though there have been times where the head's kind of nodded off, and it's like, you wake yourself up. But there are times where I was really starting to notice that kind of gap in time. And I was just like, I'm so curious about it. It's like, okay, what's happening to me when it happened? Because I don't have no recollection of what is happening physically or into my mind, but I just know there's an awareness of something's happening, and it feels like I'm unconscious. Like I start this way, I'm conscious, I'm, checking out my body, and then the time the meditation ends, it's like, where did that time go? How does it feel? It feels great. I mean, that's why I keep meditating. It's almost like, and one of the things I was always going to ask you too is, how do we make sure that we don't get so addicted to the feelings of that we don't participate in life? Because sometimes I find myself want to experience more of that reality than the reality that I have outside my window. Right. Well, I think if it makes you pull back from engaging, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
That there's this natural tendency to want to kind of protect this wonderful feeling we have because we know from past experiences that we lose it. So there's sort of two sides to that. Having quiet time in your life is a natural way to extend that feeling. So I like to have my mornings without engagement. And I was not always able to do this because I'm semi-retired today. I am able to do this, but I wasn't always. So it's a kind of I feel and relate to it as a luxury that I have in my life, that now that I've grown my kids and they've gone away and I'm in a position where I don't have to work full time. But what I really experience in that setting my morning aside is that I can have a nice meditation and remain in a kind of personal solitude until noon. And in that time, I can write, I can think about things, I can respond to emails that are important, and kind of extend that meditational experience. But inevitably, the day engages me, or I engage the day, and I have to be there. But my experience is that the deeper I meditate, the more effective I am in that engagement. And rather than holding back, I try to use the clarity of mind and the calm feeling to best advantage, to be helpful to others, to be thoughtful to others, to do things with, I like to do anything and everything well. I'm not competitive with anybody other than myself, but I always like to, even if it's cleaning the kitchen or doing a shopping trip or having a meeting with a bunch of people, I like to do them really well. And I find that meditation, that good meditation in the morning makes all of those things go better.
You find that you just have a better understanding and a better awareness of your environment because of meditation?
I think that is true. I think it's also true because I don't have a train of thought distracting me from that reality that is driven by some emotion that is either one of stress, there's things I have to do, I've got to get this done, and then the next thing done, and then the next thing done, or some interaction with another person that left me feeling out of sorts. Meditation helps me have less of my life driven by unwanted emotional reactions. And when I am driven by those unwanted emotional reactions, I'm not present. I'm not, as you say, so aware of my environment or other people because I'm running this loop in my own mind of something that's concerning me.
You find that it's really helped you with your writing and you get these inspired ideas and this creativity that is just kind of expands. I've heard so many people who are creative like yourself and are writers or creative in general, that they have they can really get into that deeper sense of self, but this storehouse of beautiful information that's just ready to be plucked like a fruit from a tree, that you can just get that download, and then it just opens up those beautiful creativity and thoughts that come as part of. Yeah,
definitely. I find that the better and deeper the meditation, the more likely I am, if I can go right into something creative, the more likely I am to experience flow, where I'm not really thinking about thinking. I have entered, for me, it's usually, how do I say this particular thing in the very best way so that someone can understand it in my case, somebody who doesn't have a spiritual or a scientific background, or in some cases, they don't have a spiritual background. How can I explain this in a common sense way that they will understand it? And when I enter this kind of flow, I find my thoughts just come together, and the writing comes together, and the meaning that I've managed to put into those paragraphs or half a page is really good. It's really clear. It's really what was appropriate for that particular piece of what I was writing in the book. Now, I may come back to that same thing and find that I have to rearrange sentences and get the grammar straight, but that the ideas that came in were really the right ones, the appropriate ones to make that point. And the time just flies. The time just flies. I will, look up and go, oh, I've been head down for 2 hours without, thinking about what I was doing.
So would you say that you're already still in that state where you're still connected? Like, because if you've developed that work, that pathways within the brain, you rewired the brain to connect to the superconscious. So when you talk about flow, you're still conscious of being able to get on the keyboard and type, and you're getting the information, and you're still connected to the superconscious. So everything's just like you say, it's just flowing down through the superconscious into your consciousness. And it's just almost like it's like your fingers are working by themselves, and you look at the page, and all of a sudden you've got this new book come out, and it's like, wow, a couple hours later.
It's like that, but that sort of suggests of a almost automatic writing kind of thing, where my mind has nothing to do with it. I'm channeling a higher mind. And it's not quite like that for me. It's more that the idea enters my mind and I have to consider it. I feel it as much as think about it. And then I piece that together into a sentence. So I'm part of that process. I hesitate to use this phrase, but it might fit here, is that I'm a co-creator.
I like that.
I'm not out of the loop because I am, in my highest self, the loop. I am that super conscious reality, and I'm just more aware of it, more deeply aware of it, more connected to it as I'm writing creatively than I would be when I don't. So when I'm not as connected, not as aware of that flow through either just having meditated or just in general, I might have good logical ideas that I put in. And sometimes that's all that is really required. But I will often notice when I come back through on a second pass or third pass that there was something a little more inspired I could have said. Just maybe one example, just a metaphor that made it all click and easier to understand. So we're a part of that. And I think that our spiritual growth, our gain in life, is taking that co-creator role seriously.
Yeah, I think that's so necessary right now, is the understanding that co-creation is creating something beautiful and wonderful out there. Now, part of the whole idea of connecting to super consciousness, what's the value for that? As an individual listening to this, to be going, it's like, why do I need to connect to the superconscious? What is it going to mean for me? What is it going to do for my life? Is it going to change my bank account? What's it going to do? You have those, those hardcore people. Sometimes they'll be thinking like, why? Like, what's the why? Why do I need to do this?
Well, it's hard to give an answer that will reach the hardcore.
But let's try. Let's try to throw a little bit at them. I mean,
what I would say is that I would ask them to take a step back from their life and ask themselves, why do I want more in my bank account? Why am I pursuing what I'm pursuing? What do they think the actual payoff to the life they're living is? And I bet with some reflection, if they're willing to do it, is that we'll all come back to they want to feel in a certain way. The money in the bank account makes them feel safe. The success in their job makes them feel energized. The relationships that they have make them feel loved or happy. All of those things are part of your superconscious self. Feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling energized, and I stress feeling here. That is all a superconscious experience. So you can go after that directly, or you can go after that indirectly. If you go after it indirectly, things are out of your control. Maybe your bank balance isn't full enough. Maybe the people around you don't love you the way you would like to be loved. Maybe the qualities you're developing in your job aren't the kind of qualities that will ultimately make you happy. Where if you meditate and go into the superconscious states and you start to feel wonderful, you can then appreciate that what I've been seeking all along through all of these activities has always just been a feeling I already have access to.
Wow.
It's like you allow yourself to feel happy because your bank balance is the way you want it to be.
I like that.
But what meditation tells you is just skip the bank balance part. Just feel happy. And that's why meditation becomes so powerfully life-changing, is that you realize, yes, I still need to be the co-creator. I still need to be helpful and serving to others. I still need to play a role in society. But I don't need to do all those things to make me happy. I can bring my happiness to those things and imbue them with much more pleasure in the doing, much more success in the outcome, much greater love than if you're waiting for other people to love you.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. See, that's a good why. See, I think that would get through to any hardcore person, the way you explain it. See, that's why you're a writer. That's why you do these wonderful books, is to bridge that gap. So for those who are listening, I mean, that's just, I really love how you explain that. It's very simplified. And because we are so guilty of doing that, all of us, me, even myself here. I mean, I'm on this journey just like everybody else who's listening to this, and I can continue, doing my meditations. But it's that process of trying to feel fullness or wholeness, and if through the meditation you already feel full, everything else it kind of feels irrelevant. It's not irrelevant, but it's not as important because you're filled up for the day. You got your tank filled.
And I think that there's something you said there I wanted to underscore, because a lot of people I talk with or get questions from will say something like, well, I have a good life. I don't want to give it up. And they're afraid that meditation will sort of somehow or another, hypnotize them into thinking that what they really need to do is go off to the Himalayas and live in a cave. And that there's no in between, right? That you go down, it's a dangerous path going down this path of meditation, because it could make me change my life in ways I don't want to change. And what I try to reassure people with is that any change that does happen, and if there's not likely to be major change, but any change that does happen is going to come from within yourself. Nothing's going to happen to you from outside that's out of your control or something you don't want. But mainly what I try to say is the life you are leading now is in all likelihood the life you should be leading now, that it has the possibilities for you to grow and expand that you need, and that you were drawn into whatever life you're leading now because it was the right one for you. And meditation will just help you get the most out of it and give the most to it.
Yeah.
And that it's extremely unlikely. I can say after 50 years of watching people meditate, none of them have gone off to the Himalayas to live in a cave.
You don't
But
have to.
all of them have embraced their life in a new way. So you also see that with near-death experiencers.
Oh yeah,
They have
100%.
these deep experiences of their higher potential and God and angels that is transformative. It's like they just wake up. But when they come back from it, they don't go to the Himalayas and live in a cave. When they come back to it, they realized, I can live my life much more fully and much more satisfyingly knowing what I know now than I ever could before, because I'm not living in fear. I'm not living hoping that something's going to happen to me that's going to make me happy. They realize all that happiness, all that satisfaction is already theirs. It's already within them. And now their life is an opportunity to let that pour through them into life and to others. And that's the transformation, not what they're doing, but why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I love the possibility of just the overall effect that when you do your change, when you become happier, it's not only just affecting you, you know, physiological, your life, you're just happy, enjoy, but it's the residual effect of people around you. You're affecting people, even though you're not really, you're not physically connecting them, you're still affecting people around you. And that's a beautiful thing some ways. You know, I just think that just the possibility of so many people, you know, living at the fullest expression into the level of joy and happiness and just walking around, and then just their energy and their presence is just affecting people around them. And they have the opportunity to go, what's going on? And I love that.
Ananda, who, you know, is my sort of core teacher, used to say, you should always smile at people. That a smile, just a simple smile, a genuine smile, don't have your, you know, a rictus of a smile pasted on your face when you don't really feel it. But a genuine smile can change another person's whole day.
Yeah.
That it's like ripples in a pond of peace, calmness, inner happiness and contentment, just rolling out and bumping into the ripples of everybody else sharing the pond.
Yeah.
And there is the old saying, which I love, which is, if you want to do something to change the world, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
So if you want
Is that
people
Gandhi?
to behave,
Is that Gandhi?
It actually was inspired by Gandhi, but he never actually said it.
Oh, okay.
But many spiritual teachers have said similar things. You know, transforming yourself is your work in the world, because by transforming yourself, you transform the world. It's the way Yogananda put it. And it's because we are all interconnected.
Yeah.
That this view of the world and ourselves as being separate entities isn't true. And so whatever you're thinking is literally affecting every human being on the planet. Now, it might not be by much, but it is real. And I think now we see that what I like to refer to as the world mind. The world mind is tense, nervous, angry.
Yep.
And we're seeing, you know, the reverberating boomerang behaviors of people who are getting affected by that. And the best thing we can do is be the opposite vibration to that, to help calm it down.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. And that was just perfect timing, because you know what, Joseph, we're almost out of time.
That happens.
Yeah, I that's one thing I love about the show. It's like we're having a great conversation, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, geez, wow, where did the time go? This is amazing. And I always enjoy conversations that do that. It's just basically you look at the time and it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to be ending the show. But that being said, Joseph, if people were looking for your books, where can they find your books? If they want to find you on Facebook, Instagram, all your social media, where can they find you, my friend?
So there is a Facebook page, Joseph Selbie. Now, Selbie is an unusual spelling of Selbie. My spelling, it's Selbie rather than BY, which is the more common spelling. So Joseph Selbie on Facebook, but you can also go to josephselbie.com, which is my website, and you can find information about all my books. You can find articles I've written, resources like the hungsaw technique that I only briefly explain, and I really recommend if you're interested to read that part of the resource section on my site, because there's more to it than just the essence I gave you.
Yeah.
And it also has links to where you can buy the books. Breaking Through the Limits of the Brain comes out officially September 1st, but you can do pre-orders for either Kindle or the print version. And there will be an Audible book available of Break Through the Limits of the Brain, also beginning on September 1st. And there are Audible books available on the other books there as well for people. More and more people like to listen to nonfiction, driving in their car or walking or running. So Audible has become an extremely popular version of all of my books.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we're busy on either commuting or doing something, and sometimes we're spending hours commuting, depending on where you live in the world.
Yeah.
And the traffic could be just crazy, or you just, in general, like you just go for a run, you're at the gym, and it's a good way to feed the brain while you're feeding your body too as well. Yeah, I highly recommend the books. You're really going to enjoy them. They're fantastic reads, especially for people who want to understand spirituality and science in a very easy way, a very digestible way. I so appreciate you, Joseph, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on the show and to talk to my listeners and to impart some of this beautiful wisdom that you share within your books too as well. So again, thank you so much.
Been my pleasure. Been a great conversation. You were an excellent host.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, that being said, everybody, I'm just going to close off the podcast here. This has been the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with your host, Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.